Hey, it's Big T here. Today I'm going to tie a fly I call a Humpulator. It's kind of a cross between a stimulator and a humpy. Had a reason to try and dry drop with some heavy weighted flies and kind of came up with this as something that would float some heavy stuff, and actually have a customer who's looking for something similar right now. This is tied on a number 8 barbless terrestrial hook that I have in my store right now that I like to use for stoneflies and stimulators, things of that nature. I'm using some red. This is Danville's 70 denier. And I'm going to start by tying in some olive Antron yarn. I've doubled that over, and I'm going to use that for my tail because it's a pretty buoyant material, especially if you throw a little floating on it. And I'm going to go about that big or that long and go ahead and trim off the excess. Then I'm going to wrap up to about a third of the distance down from the eye, and I'm going to tie in a piece of foam that I've cut into a long strip. And as I tie that in, I'm just going to take loose wraps going down. There's no reason to tie that too tight. If you do, you're compressing a lot of the air out of that, which is what's making that foam buoyant and floaty. I'm going to tie in a piece of olive hackle. I'm oversizing this because I'm trying to make it a fly that will float excess weight for us. And then I'm actually going to take a little bit of really light dry fly dubbing. This is in an olive color as well. And I just kind of want to cover that foam. I don't want too much of this on there because it's got the ability to soak in some water and affect the way that fly is going to float. Take that and go ahead, and if you don't have the rotary feature, you're just going to spin that hackle. And I'm going to keep it fairly tight together, again for the flotation capability. Move that out of the way. Wrap it a couple times and clip that off. I like to start up on the feather and move down when I'm clipping that off, keeping my scissors fairly closed. And what that does is it helps me to trim that stem off, but prevents me from taking a lot of other fibers with it. Alright, I'm going to fold this piece of foam over and try and make sure I maintain that centered on the hook. And we'll wrap that down a couple times and secure it, and actually fold it back and secure it as well. And trim that off. That's created the humpy portion. The next thing I'm going to do is take a little bit of the New Zealand strike indicator wool. This stuff is oftentimes used for the strike indicator purpose. They've got a special system. I'm going to bunch it up and kind of trim off the tips to make it even there. I'm just going to put a little clump of that right there. That is another great flotation feature that this fly is going to have. When we add some floatant to that, that's going to help tremendously. We'll take a little elk hair at this point and go ahead and stack that. Try and get the tips as even as we can. I don't get too meticulous with that, however. And I'm going to measure that to see exactly where I want that to go. And trim off the excess. Make a couple loose wraps before you tighten that down. And then I'm going to try and go ahead and cover the majority of that. See if it'll cooperate with me. Take a little time to build that up because oftentimes you've got a fairly steep differential from where you've cut. Sometimes I'll cut those tips on an angle to lessen the slope here. Can't really get that one little fiber, but I'm going to let it go. Again, I'm going to come back with just a little bit of that olive dubbing. But I want some of that red to bleed through. And this front portion I'm actually going to tie in a little different hackle to give it a little bit of a different look. This is just your standard grizzly hackle. Give this a quick half hitch so that that doesn't come off on me. And get a few turns of that grizzly hackle there. It was a pretty short piece to work with, but that should do. Actually, it's not going to do for me. So what we're going to do is we're going to go back with the olive, but you can make variations, make changes with that, play around with it. Take the half hitch tool. Sometimes I like to use that tool because it'll push some of these fibers backwards, otherwise I'll just trim them off. And when I use that for my knotting, a lot of times what I'll do in order to make sure I've got this secured and the front end doesn't come off is I'll take my Zap-A-Gap brush on and I'll go ahead and grab a bodkin. Just take that, wipe a little bit on the end of this. That way you can be a little bit more precise with your placement on the thread. And that's got it. Final thing I will do with this fly, since I have oversized the hackle and it is longer than the hook right here, I will often just trim those fibers up. What that does is create a flat surface right here so that fly floats upright. But that is it. That is Big T's Humpulator, and that thing will float some serious weight. Hope you enjoy this. Please subscribe to my channel, Big T Fly Fishing, and visit the store as well at www.bigtflyfishing.com.